The Carter Enterprises charity gala, where crystal lights danced on the ceiling, red wine shimmered in glasses, and elegant smiles were exchanged like currency. Zoe Brown stepped in with confident strides, even though her heart was trembling inside. Her black body-hugging dress accentuated her petite yet alluring figure. Her lips were as red as burgundy wine, and her eyes sharp with a trace of caution. She wasn't here to draw attention. Her goal was to impress the recruitment board, hoping to be selected as the lead interior designer for Carter Enterprises' new project line. But when Ethan's eyes met hers from across the hall, every part of her froze. Ethan Black, her ex, a man she once loved deeply, but who betrayed her and shattered her trust with a single lie. 2 years ago, Ethan stole Zoe's design and later accused her of sabotaging him out of jealousy, a piece she had poured months of effort into. He landed a major contract. When Zoe quietly submitted partial metadata proving the original design was hers, rumors about Ethan began to circulate. To kill the speculation, he dropped to one knee and proposed to her in front of hundreds at a design industry conference, not out of love, but to pressure her into accepting and clearing his name. Zoe refused. Not only did she refuse, she also released all the evidence proving the design was hers, exposing him on the spot. He lost face, lost the contract, and from that moment on, he turned into a vengeful shadow that lingered around her life. He blamed her for his failures, constantly harassing her. She had done everything to avoid him since. And now he was standing in front of her again in a silver-gray suit, smirking with a venomous glint in his eyes. "Zoe," he murmured, cornering her between the wine display and the dessert station. "Long time no see. Still wearing black like you're mourning your own ethics?" Zoe tightened her grip on her clutch, her eyes turning icy. "And you still prefer stealing over starting from scratch. Old habits die hard." Ethan sneered and stepped closer. "You made me lose everything, Zoe. The contract, my reputation, my family's trust. You really think a simple rejection makes us even?" She knew she had to get away. Her eyes darted around, searching for an escape. No one helped. No one looked. Just like 2 years ago. Number not this time. She scanned the room and saw him. Near the balcony, standing alone by the large glass wall, was a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, in a perfectly tailored navy suit, with neatly styled chestnut hair. His back was turned, gazing out at the lit-up city. Without thinking, Zoe rushed over, placed her hand on his shoulder, and gently turned him around. The man barely had time to react before she pulled him down and kissed him. Lips touched lips. Soft were warm. The scent of wine and masculine mint mixed with her fear and adrenaline. She thought he'd pull away, but he didn't. He kissed her back. His hand slid to her waist, tightening, then drew her closer. His lips moved slowly but firmly, taking full control of the kiss. Her body pressed against his solid chest, breath shattered, and at some point her hands gripped his lapels just to keep from collapsing. A hushed murmur rose around them. A camera clicked. She pulled away in shock, only to meet eyes as dark as obsidian. The man stared at her as if he had just stepped out of the shadows of a dream. Moisture still lingered on his lips, but his gaze, it was cold, deep, and dangerous. "You've just created a very big problem," he said, his voice low and slow, like grinding out each word. Zoe swallowed hard and whispered, I'm sorry, I just—" "Running away?" She nodded. "Ex-boyfriend, a real piece of work." The man tilted his chin toward the space behind her. Ethan was frozen, eyes wide in disbelief. The man looked at her again. "Not bad." "What?" "A kiss to destroy an enemy. I like that style." Zoe was about to respond when an assistant rushed over and whispered in his ear, "Mr. Carter, Valerie Holt is in the main hall. Media's already gathering." Zoe froze. Damian Carter, CEO of Carter Enterprises, the man she had just kissed, was the powerful, cold-hearted executive who would be interviewing her for the lead design position she dreamed of? Crap. Her lips were still burning. Her head spun like a storm. And Damian, instead of being angry, smiled. A thin, razor-like smile. "What's your name?" he asked. "Zoe Brown." He leaned in, his breath brushing her ear. "Thank you for the kiss, but I never leave a debt unpaid. What do you mean? He turned and walked away, his tall figure merging into the crowd like a wolf among sheep. Zoe stood there, her knees ready to buckle. I'm so screwed. You're watching Soul Stories, where every story whispers of love, healing, and hope. Let us know which city you're watching from. The next morning, Zoe woke up with a pounding headache, like someone had shoved an entire toolbox into her brain. She stumbled out of bed, checked her phone, and nearly fell over at the first message on her screen. From the man she kissed last night. Carter Enterprises office, 9 a.m. Don't wear black again. It's distracting. What the hell? Zoe blinked. And so, 30 minutes later, she now dressed in a pastel blue office dress that screamed, convent school dress code, stood in front of the CEO's office, holding her portfolio, her mind still spinning. The glass door opened. Damian Carter, the man she had lip-locked with and who had fried her entire nervous system last night, was seated behind the desk. White shirt, sleeves rolled up, fingers tapping rhythmically on the surface like a maestro conducting a symphony of power. Close the door, he said without looking up. Zoe closed it, sweat trickling down her back like she'd just finished a Zumba class. I'm here to apologize, she began, voice tense, and to make sure you're not suing me for kissing the CEO in public without consent. Damian looked up. That smile, colder than an Arctic air conditioner, but damn it, still too damn attractive. I'm not planning to sue, he said, rising and walking toward her, each step slow and deliberate, like a cat toying with its prey. Actually, I have a proposal. What kind of proposal? Zoe took a half step back. If this is about a kiss do-over for scientific accuracy, save it. Last night's free sample was more than enough. You like me that much? He tilted his head, one eyebrow arched. No need to act so resistant. It's not resistance. It's self-prescribed antibiotics for my nervous system, she muttered, then lifted her chin. Spit it out. What's the proposal? Damian turned, picked up a folder, and slid it toward her. Pretend to be my girlfriend. Zoe blinked. Excuse me? Fake date me. For a while. You mean like a sugar baby arrangement? She rolled her eyes. I'm not that kind of girl. No, he chuckled. It's a contractual relationship. Valerie, my ex, is spreading rumors that we're getting engaged to boost her leverage in the merger deal. I need to shut that down. Zoe crossed her arms. And you picked me? The girl who kissed you by mistake. You checked the boxes, smart, media-proof, and... His eyes lazily slid down her figure. Inappropriately attractive. Zoe flushed. I'm not as cheap as you think. No one's cheap here, Damian replied, leaning against the desk, his gaze sharp as a blade. I'm offering a monthly payment plus career support. You can keep your cat, but you'll move in with me to make the arrangement media credible. Wait, what? Zoe choked. You're saying I have to live with you like some kind of fake wife? Exactly. He raised an eyebrow. With a few ground rules. What rules? No emotions, no sex, no breaking the law. Zoe narrowed her eyes. This sounds like an R-rated reality show that never airs. Damian laughed for the first time, genuinely, and it made Zoe's heart skip half a beat. She stepped forward, snatched the contract, and skimmed it. Clause 6.2. No sharing a bed unless necessary to maintain media narrative. Clause 8.1. Public displays of affection may be required. Resistance is not permitted. She looked up. Kissing counts as affection, right? For me, that's a warm-up, Damian winked. Relax, I'm in full control. And if I say no, you'll still be stuck under the shadow of being the girl who kissed the CEO to steal a lead designer role. You might even get fired. Zoe bit her lip. That damned kiss from last night was dragging her into a bottomless pit. She sighed. What kind of sleepwear am I allowed? Damian arched a brow. What you wear or don't wear is personal freedom. But if you want me to maintain control, then avoid lace, sheer fabrics, and especially, don't moan, it's so hot in the middle of the night. Zoe gaped. You're seriously a pervert. Not a pervert, He stepped closer, his voice dropping, tone so intense her skin prickled. I'm just someone who knows exactly what he wants and how to control it. As for you, he leaned in low, his voice brushing her ear, sending chills down her spine. You're the first person to make me lose control with just one kiss. Zoe swallowed. Her body was on fire not from the words, but from that gaze. That gaze could undress her with pure imagination. And worse, part of her wanted it. She turned away, grabbed the pen, and signed. Fine, Mr. CEO, but if you cross the contractual line, I'll wait for you to invite me, he cut in, eyes glittering. And trust me, Zoe, you will. You can choose any room on the third floor, Damien said, his voice as flat as if he were reading from a contract. Except mine. Zoe stood in the grand foyer of the Carter estate, glancing around like she'd stepped into a Hollywood film. Everything was too clean, too polished, too cold. Do you realize this place looks like a robot showroom? She asked, holding Muffin, who was glaring suspiciously at the LED lighting. The fewer things, the fewer problems, Damien replied, adjusting the collar of his dress shirt. Zoe rolled her eyes. And emotions? You toss those out too? Damien looked at her, eyes drifting briefly from head to toe. I still have emotions. I'm just selective about who triggers them. Zoe blushed. Save it. I'll take the last room at the end of the hall on the third floor. It's near the balcony, lots of sunlight. Muffin likes birdwatching. Where you stay doesn't matter, as long as you don't cause chaos. Zoe smirked. Then I've got a few rules too. 1, don't barge into my room. 2, don't touch my cat. 3, don't sneeze on my underwear drying in the bathroom. Damien choked slightly. I'll try to restrain myself. The first night, the mansion usually quiet like a library, suddenly felt oddly alive. Zoe sang bolero songs in the shower. Water splashed all over the luxury carpet. Then she carried a bowl of instant noodles upstairs because, in her words, artists need fuel at night. Damien lay awake in the master bedroom on the second floor, restless. Not because of the music, but because of the laughter. Her laughter echoed down the hallway, soft, warm, like some strange scent that made the house feel not so soulless anymore. He got out of bed around 2 a.m., opened his door, headed to the kitchen, not because he was hungry, but because he was curious. And then he saw her. Zoe stood in the kitchen, wearing a pearly silk nightgown, her hair slightly tousled, holding Muffin in her arms, half asleep. Can't sleep? She asked lazily, her voice husky from staying up late. Damien meant to answer, but his eyes dropped to the edge of her nightgown, slipping off one shoulder, revealing her delicate collarbone and smooth skin glowing under the kitchen light. He cleared his throat. I was thirsty? Zoe walked past him, leaning slightly to grab a glass. The motion caused her nightgown to slip just a bit more. She didn't mean to, but she didn't stop it either. You know, she said as she poured water, part of the reason I signed the contract was to piss off my ex. But another part, she turned and smiled. I wanted to see how long a CEO can survive my mess. Damien leaned against the fridge, gripping his water glass a little tighter. So far, I'm surviving. Better than I expected. Zoe shrugged, then stepped closer, too close. A soft scent wafted off her skin. Not heavy perfume. Something warm, natural, and lethally dangerous at 2 a.m. So how many dreams do you plan to have about me before you revise Clause 8.2? Damien frowned. There's no Clause 8.2 about dreams. Zoe whispered, lips curling. I meant the no-sex clause. The air froze. 1 second. 2 seconds. He leaned down, very close, eyes locked on hers. If I revise it, would you sign the amendment? Zoe arched an eyebrow. Not yet, but... She placed her hand on his chest, feeling the strong rhythm beneath her own thin silk nightgown. If you dream of me, I'll allow it. She stepped back, turned away, scooped Muffin into her arms. Sleep tight, Mr. Cold-Hearted CEO. And as she ascended the stairs, she tossed one last sentence over her shoulder, careless but incendiary enough to set fire to every clause in their contract. Don't dream too long. I sleep without a bra. Damien stood there, the glass trembling slightly in his hand. The problem wasn't the bedroom. The problem was, what was sleeping on the third floor? The sound of high heels echoed sharply across the marble floor, each step deliberate, calculated, like a predator in a red silk dress entering foreign territory uninvited. Zoe was in the kitchen eating cold pizza, just her, muffin, and a newly invented matcha egg coffee recipe when she looked up and saw her. Valerie Holt, Damien's ex, also the business partner of Jameson Holt, Damien's biggest rival in the tech industry. She wore a tight dress, makeup flawless as if ready for the cover of Vogue, and eyes sharp enough to slice through glass. You, Valerie raised an eyebrow. Damien's fiancé? Zoe, still chewing her pizza, replied slowly, "Mm-hmm. And who exactly are you? A shoppy model? Or maybe a decorative plant stylist?" Zoe swallowed the bite, wiped her mouth with a napkin printed with little cats. "I'm the toy he put a ring on. Cheap or not, probably more expensive than you think." Valerie sneered and stepped closer, voice dropping. "Do you even know who Damien is? He's a master manipulator. What do you think you are in his little game? Definitely not the bitter loser standing in front of me." Boom. The air went still. And then, Damien walked in. Charcoal gray suit, icy stare, his presence crashing down like a storm over the marble tiles. "That's enough, Valerie," his voice rang out, firm and final. "You don't get to speak to Zoe like that." Valerie turned. "You're marrying this?" Damien strode over, standing beside Zoe, his hand gently resting on her waist as if claiming her. "Zoe isn't my fiancée," he said. Zoe's eyes widened. "Oh no, is she about to get cut from the script?" Valerie smirked, triumphant. But then Damien leaned down and whispered in Zoe's ear, "You're going to be my wife." Both women froze, but for very different reasons. Zoe choked on her drink. Valerie went pale. "What? What did you just say?" Zoe asked, her voice cracking like a wine glass hitting a wall. 3 days from now, we'll have a real wedding," Damien said clearly. Zoe stared at him, utterly confused. "Are you running a fever?" "I'm not joking," he replied, his hand tightening slightly on her waist, his gaze locked on her lips like he was replaying that first kiss and wanting a second take. This time for real. Valerie's face drained of color. "You'd throw everything away. For her?" Damien turned to her, voice steady. "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm upgrading." Valerie clenched her purse, threw Zoe a look that could kill, and stormed off her heels, clicking furiously like the soundtrack of defeat. Once the door slammed shut, Zoe turned to Damien, still stunned. "A real wedding? What does that even mean? Have you completely lost your mind?" Damien took off his suit jacket slowly, as if shedding the icy CEO exterior to become a man. "You said you wanted somewhere to belong. I can give you that, and He paused, his gaze softening. "I need someone who can make me believe in something other than numbers." Zoe laughed. "You trying to win me over with Silicon Valley philosophy?" Damien didn't answer. Instead, he stepped closer, much closer. "We've kissed. We've lived under the same roof. We've faked it in front of cameras. What else do you need to officially be my wife?" "A real proposal," Zoe mumbled, eyes flicking to the second button on his now open shirt. Damien tilted his head, smiling. "That'll come after you agree to wear the white dress." "And if I say no, then I'll marry you my way," he whispered, leaning in, one hand sliding around her waist, his lips hovering dangerously close. "Through contract or through the bedroom?" Zoe blushed, gently pushing him away. "Are you threatening me or seducing me?" Damien's voice was hoarse. "Both." That night, Zoe locked the guest room door on the third floor and buried herself under the blanket. But her heart wouldn't stop racing. Not because of the contract, because of his eyes and that hand. No designer wedding gown, no paparazzi, no VIP guests or press coverage. The wedding of Zoe and Damien had only a few trusted staff, an elderly officiant with a calm voice, and the small garden behind the mansion decorated by Zoe herself with golden lights, scented candles, and lavender swaying gently in the evening breeze. Zoe wore a rented dress, simple yet form-fitting, the soft ivory silk highlighting her slender waist and graceful curves. The low back and light train made every step feel like a silent, mesmerizing dance. Damien waited beneath an archway wrapped in green leaves. When Zoe approached, he paused for half a second. His heartbeat skipped. "You do know you're making it hard for me to breathe, right?" he whispered as she reached him. Zoe raised an eyebrow, smiling slightly. "I thought CEOs were trained to breathe under all circumstances. With you, no one's trained enough." The vows were read. Each word, each pause felt scripted, but Damien's eyes didn't lie. As he took her hand and slid a slender diamond ring onto her finger, his touch was light, like brushing against a memory he never had but had longed for. "Zoe Brown," he said in a low voice, "I won't promise to be the perfect husband, but I do promise not to let anyone hurt you. Not even me." Zoe was stunned. For a moment, all the lines blurred. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Damien didn't hesitate. He leaned in, one hand gently at the back of her neck, the other around her waist, pulling her close. The kiss came slow, deep, and dangerously real. It wasn't for show. No one needed to watch. But it felt as if the whole world had paused to hear the sound of their breath becoming one. His lips were warm, pressing into hers with just enough pressure to make her tremble, not from cold, but from the way her heart pounded. He kissed her like every cell in his body already knew the taste of her lips. And when he finally pulled away, Zoe could barely stay standing. "Want to rehearse that part again?" Damien asked hoarsely. "No need," Zoe replied, dazed. "If we do, I'll collapse." Muffin meowed as if agreeing. That night, Zoe curled up on the living room sofa, hugging Muffin like he was her last shred of independent woman pride. She wasn't sleepless. She just couldn't bring herself to walk into Damien's room. Even though they were married, even though that kiss still burned on her lips, she was just about to distract herself with a podcast when the door swung open. Damien's sleeves rolled up. Dark sleep pants, hair tousled like he'd just run his hands through it in frustration, stood there. "You really planning to sleep out here?" he asked, voice low. "Yup," she answered nonchalantly. "Muffin and I need space." Damien leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, his gaze drifting from the thin blanket down to her bare legs, and then stopping at the dangerously disarming element, a white lace nightgown, sheer as mist, hugging every curve of a woman who'd just gotten married, but hadn't been touched. He took a deep breath. "You're trying to kill me, aren't you?" Zoe raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me? You're dressed like that, one wall away from my room, with a cat, and I'm all alone." She giggled. "You sound like a frustrated house husband." Damien stepped closer, leaning down, one arm resting on the couch beside her head. "Contract husband, but real heart." She blushed. "Go to bed, Mr. CEO." He leaned even lower, his lips brushing her ear. "And if I can't sleep, then read Clause 9. Do not attack the bride in the middle of the night, even if the contract is signed." Damien chuckled softly, then backed off. "You're good, but you'd better sleep because if I stare for 2 more minutes, Clause 9's going to vanish." Then he turned and walked away, his tall figure fading into the hallway. Zoe hugged her pillow, her heart racing like she'd just finished a marathon. His gaze still lingered at the back of her neck. Every time she thought of his lips, she swallowed hard. Contract husband? Maybe. But her smile today? That was real. Being the wife of a CEO was nothing like a drama series. There were no nightly hand-in-hand strolls, no breakfast-in-bed moments. Instead, Zoe had to show up at events under the title Mrs. Damien Carter, wear expensive dresses, apply company-approved red lipstick, and play the role of a woman hopelessly in love with her husband. She played it too well. At one project launch event, when Damien leaned in to kiss her lightly on the cheek under the camera flashes, Zoe flinched slightly. His lips were warm, His hand gripped her waist lightly but firmly, and when his mouth brushed her ear, he whispered, "Don't tremble, sweetheart. We're just acting." Zoe clenched her teeth, keeping her dazzling smile, and hissed back, "I'm trembling because of your hand. It's a little too low." Damien smiled the kind of smile that made half the PR team blush without knowing why, and casually kept his hand right where it was. The next afternoon at Carter Enterprises' design office, Zoe was having lunch with Caleb, a new colleague transferred from the Singapore branch. They were laughing as they sketched out a smart home demo model. Caleb was handsome, polite, and had hands so skilled. Even Muffin was content curled up in his lap. The problem was, Damien walked in. He said nothing, just looked the kind of look that made every cell in Zoe's body go cold. His eyes locked on Caleb, then shifted to Zoe, who was smiling, her eyes sparkling, clearly enjoying herself. No one said a word, but a silent storm had started brewing. That evening, in the sleek modern kitchen filled with the scent of chicken curry, Zoe was setting out bowls when Damien entered. His shirt was unbuttoned at the top, tie loosened. His eyes still held that same storm from earlier. She turned. "You want spicy or extra spicy?" Damien glanced at her curry bowl, then silently walked closer. And like fate had a twisted sense of humor, his arm accidentally knocked the entire hot bowl of curry onto the floor. Zoe froze, then crossed her arms, one brow arched. "Well, that was graceful. Feeling weak lately, Mr. CEO?" Damien didn't argue. He just stood very close. Too close. "Do you like eating with someone else?" His voice was low, rumbling like thunder before the rain. Zoe squinted. "Are we talking about the curry or about Caleb?" "Both." She let out a dry laugh. "I believe Clause 7 of our contract said, no interference in each other's social relationships." Damien took another step forward. "I don't like other people touching what's mine." His voice was sharp, his eyes darkened. One hand braced against the counter near her waist. His breath hit the side of her neck, warm, fast, and dangerously male. Zoe swallowed hard. Her heart raced. She knew that scent, sandalwood cologne, and male jealousy. "The problem is," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "I'm not an object." Damien didn't move, but his eyes burned brighter. He leaned in, lips almost brushing her ear, and said hoarsely, "You're not an object, but you are my wife, and I'm not good at sharing." Zoe slowly turned her head and found his lips just centimeters from hers. "Marrying me doesn't mean owning me." "Not owning," he whispered, "just holding tight." She bit her lip and turned away. "We don't kiss before dinner. Hygiene rules, remember?" Damien froze, then chuckled a low, frustrated laugh and stepped back. "Careful, Zoe. The more you challenge me, the more I want to break the rules." Zoe marched upstairs and shut her bedroom door, but her heart wide open. He was jealous, and not even trying to hide it. She buried her face in a pillow and screamed into it, "What the hell is happening right now?" On the other side of the wall, Damien leaned against his own door, staring at the ceiling. "What the hell is happening right now?" he echoed silently inside his own head. Still following the story? If this story found you outside of Soul Stories, we invite you home, to where every touching tale begins with truth, hope, and heart. It was close to midnight. The third floor of the Carter mansion was bathed in soft golden light from a single desk lamp. Interior design sketches were scattered across the wooden surface. Pencils rolled to the edges, and the laptop still glowed battery, down to 3%. Zoe had fallen asleep at the desk. Her hair draped down, brushing against her sleeve. Her breathing was slow and steady. One hand still held a pencil, the other wrapped around a folder like she was hugging her passion. Damien had been standing in the doorway for a while, silently watching. His shirt was unbuttoned at the top, one hand in his pocket, hair slightly tousled from the tense meetings earlier that day. But right now, his mind was nowhere near work. He walked over and gently draped a thin blanket over her shoulders. In that moment, looking at Zoe's sleeping face, his chest tightened. For the first time, home wasn't a mansion. It was a girl with ink smudged on her cheek, sleeping over her dreams. Zoe stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open. Mmm, what time is it? Her voice was raspy with sleep. Then she looked up and saw him. Damien. The warm light lit up half his face. The other half was lost in shadow. His shirt unbuttoned just enough to reveal a sculpted chest. That familiar scent drifted over amber, sandalwood, and something that was unmistakably him. You... Zoe rubbed her eyes, still groggy. Why aren't you asleep? Shouldn't I be asking you that? Damien replied, his voice low, his eyes pausing on the thin t-shirt slipping off her shoulder. Zoe quickly pulled the blanket higher. I was working, not trying to seduce you, I swear. Damien stepped closer. But you still managed to. Zoe flushed. I remember the rules. No feelings, no rule breaking, he cut in, his fingers brushing lightly across her cheek, skimming over her soft skin like he was burning the air between them. Maybe I want to break them. She held her breath. His lips came closer. So close, all it would take was one tilt forward and it would happen. But he stopped. His eyes this time weren't just filled with desire. There was something more, something honest. Like he was silently asking himself, if I kiss her, will I ever come back from it? Have you ever thought about what you really want, Zoe? Beyond work? She froze. That question so raw and unguarded made her tremble. What do you mean? Damien sat down beside her, resting his elbows on his knees, fingers interlaced. I used to think all I needed was power. Sign the deal, add a few billion. But lately, I wonder, is there someone waiting for me at home? Someone to share a cold cup of coffee with? Zoe was quiet. She hadn't expected this from Damien. He turned to her, eyes deep, no teasing this time. And you? What's your dream? Zoe swallowed. She rarely shared this with anyone. I want freedom, to draw without being judged, to live without running. But, she looked down, I'm scared. Scared I'll never find a place where I truly belong. Damien didn't speak. He just looked at her. Then gently. Maybe you're closer than you think. Zoe looked up. For a moment, neither of them moved. Only the ticking clock broke the silence, and her heart pounded like it might break out of her chest. Damien stood up and walked to the door. But before he left, he turned back, and whether by accident or intention, his fingers brushed against hers. A fleeting touch, yet it burned more than any kiss. Zoe sat there flushed, her skin tingling with the electricity of that moment. Damien closed the door behind him, and leaning back against it, he whispered to no one but himself. Damn it, I'm falling for her. Crystal Hall, the venue for Carter Enterprises' latest architectural tech launch, glowed with lights and congratulations. Zoe stood in the designated area for the design team, dressed in a pale blue gown, her makeup soft yet precise. She chatted with a few colleagues, mocktail in hand, her eyes scanning the glamorous room. But nothing warned her that the past was lurking behind her. You really thought you could escape me that easily, Zoe? The icy voice froze her spine. Her glass nearly slipped from her fingers. She turned. Ethan, that same hateful gaze, but this time without the polished veneer. His smile was twisted, his eyes sharp and ready to rip. What are you doing here? Zoe took half a step back, her voice steadier than the drums beating in her chest. I'm the guest of honor for Jameson Holt, he said with a crooked smirk. I should have been the one standing next to Damien today, if it weren't for you. Don't blame others for your lack of integrity, Zoe replied, trying to keep her tone calm. You ruined me, Ethan snapped, stepping closer. 2 years ago, I lost everything: contracts, reputation, pride because of you. And now you think you can hide behind a rich husband and get away with it? Zoe's hands clenched. I only wanted to get away from you. You're the one who dug your own grave. Ethan scoffed. Now you're Damien Carter's wife? You think he'll protect you forever? Trust me, I'll take both of you down at once. Is there a problem here? The voice came from behind, deep, cold, and deadly. The nearby area fell silent as Damien strode in sharp in a tailored black suit, his tie matching the shade of Zoe's dress. His eyes locked onto Ethan like a predator sizing up its prey. We're just reminiscing, Ethan said with a forced grin. Damien didn't respond. He stepped forward and positioned himself in front of Zoe, shielding her with his body. His gaze was icier than ever. "Threaten my wife again, and I'll let the law dismantle you so thoroughly that not even your name will remain in your business records." Ethan went silent, and at that exact moment, camera shutters clicked. The photographers had captured it all. Without turning, Damien spoke loudly. "For the record, Zoe is my wife. Any attempt to harass, threaten, or exploit her identity will be dealt with legally. Understood?" The room went still. Ethan's face turned pale, and for the first time in 2 years, he was the one who backed off. In the hotel elevator, the doors closed. Zoe stood there, shaking. "I'm fine," she whispered, though her hand was clenched into a fist. Damien said nothing. He simply looked at her, then stepped forward and pulled her into his arms. "He won't touch you again," he murmured, his hand firm around her waist, holding her like she might disappear. Zoe tucked herself into his chest, her chin quivering. "I never meant to hurt him. I just wanted to escape. But I let it go. Too far." Her mind drifted back 2 years ago. Back then, she'd been one of the most promising young talents in interior design. She and Ethan had been colleagues and lovers working at a small studio. She had poured her soul into a breakthrough design, laboring for months, from sketching to 3D modeling. Every line, every detail had been hers sweat and sleepless nights. But just days before the major presentation, her design was stolen. And then Ethan, her boyfriend at the time, presented that exact design under his name. The crowd applauded. He secured a massive contract. And when Zoe tried to speak up, he twisted the narrative. "You're accusing me? This design was signed and emailed from my account. You have no proof. You're just jealous, aren't you?" No one believed her. She was fired. The design community turned its back. Her social media exploded with criticism and mockery, from rising star to outcast. Later, she uploaded fragments of evidence online, trying to prove Ethan had stolen her work. Slowly, the public started to question him. And then, like a final dagger during the design conference 2 years ago, Ethan walked on stage under 100 cameras and proposed to her. "Let's show the world we're still a team. Come back to me, Zoe. You know this will save your reputation." No love, just a calculated performance meant to save his image by turning Zoe from backstabber to misunderstood girlfriend. But Zoe was no longer that fragile girl. In front of everyone, she exposed the truth, presenting the original files, timestamps, early-stage concept drafts, and internal emails proving the theft. Every eye turned to Ethan. The silence was suffocating. Then came the fallout. Partners withdrew, media turned their backs, and he lost everything. Since then, he became a bitter shadow, always lingering. Damien rested his chin on the top of her head and whispered, "You did nothing wrong. You survived." His voice was no longer cold. It was warm, achingly warm. He gently patted her back, then pressed a soft kiss to her forehead, so tender it shattered something inside her. Zoe closed her eyes. For the first time in 2 years, she felt safe in a man's arms. Not as a place to run, but as a place to stay. Night fell. Moonlight spilled over the balcony of the Carter mansion, casting a soft, velvety glow across the marble floor. Zoe sat on a long bench, wrapped in a thin cardigan, a glass of red wine swirling in her hand. Damien sat beside her, sleeves rolled up, his eyes fixed on the vast, silent sky. Between them sat a half-empty bottle of wine and 1,000 unspoken things. "Where would you go first?" Damien asked, his voice low like the night wind. Zoe smiled faintly, her cheeks tinged pink from the wine. "You mean, if I could travel the world?" "Yeah, no obligations, no responsibilities. Just you, a map, and the open sky." She propped her chin on her hand. "Santorini. I want to paint the sunset there. Then Venice, Kyoto in autumn, and somewhere far away where no one knows my name." "Trying to escape everything?" "Not to run," she said softly, "but to finally live on my own terms." Zoe took a sip, her eyes dreamy. "I used to think I didn't deserve that kind of freedom. But then I met you." Damien turned to her. That one sentence, short, vague, shifted the air between them. Meeting you, he said slowly, made me question everything. The power, the company, the numbers. I thought it was enough. But then you showed up with your cat, flowers scattered across the kitchen, and a beautiful chaos that reminded me I was still breathing. He brushed his fingers lightly across her hand, just a glancing touch, like a spark flickering through the air. Zoe looked up, her eyes locking with his. Her heart skipped its rhythm. Damien! He leaned in and lifted her chin. I can't keep looking at you without touching you. And he kissed her, their first real kiss. No cameras, no audience, no contract. Only want, only truth. His lips were burning sweet and intense. His arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her onto his lap. She responded as if her body had waited for this moment all along. They kissed deeper, longer, no restraint. Their heartbeats synced. Their breaths melted together. Her cardigan slipped off one shoulder, and her bare skin brushed his firm chest through his thin shirt. It made her shiver. Damien broke the kiss, whispering, "Tell me you don't want me and I'll stop." Zoe closed her eyes, trembling. I don't know what I'll do if you leave, but what if you break my heart?" His gaze darkened, but not with desire, with pain. He said softly, almost inaudibly, "I'm not acting, Zoe, not anymore. You're mine, and I want to be yours." His lips trailed down to her collarbone, kissing it gentle, reverent. Suddenly, Zoe pulled away, breath shaky, panic flashing in her eyes. I need to think." She rushed back to her room, heart racing, chest rising and falling like she'd just escaped a dangerously sweet dream. Damien sat back, staring at the spot where she'd just been. Her glass was still half full, but his heart felt completely empty. Upstairs, Zoe leaned against her closed bedroom door, one hand pressed to her chest. This wasn't pretend anymore, and that terrified her more than anything. She closed the door and pressed her back to the cool wood. Outside, waves crashed gently in the distance, wind rustling the trees beyond the mansion. But inside her, everything was drowned out by the thunder of her own heartbeat. She didn't know what she'd just done, didn't know what she had run from, or what she might have just missed. She walked to the bed and sat down. Her hands trembled as she set a glass of water on the nightstand. A single tear slid down her cheek, silent. He's not Ethan. Damien never lied to me. He hasn't done anything wrong. And that was what scared her most. If this was real, if what she felt with Damien was real, then she would have to admit she'd opened her heart again. And after what happened years ago, there weren't many pieces left to gamble. Downstairs, Damien still sat on the balcony. Zoe's wineglass rested in his hand. He looked up at the sky. Damn it! He had never felt so out of control. Her lips still tasted like sweet wine. Her skin was still on his hands, soft, real. And his heart. It ached when he saw the fear in her eyes. Did I move too fast? Did I scare her? He was used to women falling into his arms for power, for money. But Zoe wasn't like them. She didn't need him, and that made him want her even more. He looked up at her window still lit, and for the first time, Damien Carter, the cold, commanding CEO who could silence a boardroom with one glance, sat quietly, waiting for a door to open, waiting for a heart to come a little closer. In her room, Zoe rose and walked to the window. She looked down and saw him alone, sitting in the darkness. No suit, no luxury car, just a man waiting for something beyond contracts and obligations. And her heart stirred. For the first time in years, it wasn't beating out of fear, but out of hope. The Carter mansion glowed brightly under the lights of the charity gala Damien had personally hosted. From afar, where luxury cars pulled up one by one, the constant flashes of cameras felt like sparks, warning signs of an emotional explosion about to erupt. Zoe stood beside Damien, her form-hugging evening gown elegant, her hair loosely pinned up, revealing her graceful collarbone. Damien, in a classic tuxedo, stood tall and cold, but his hand never left her waist. To the public eye, they were the newest power couple, a millionaire CEO, and the mysterious wife who had once been an unknown designer. But somewhere in the crowd, Ethan was waiting, and on the rooftop of the adjacent hotel, Valerie raised a champagne flute, her gaze focused through the lens of a long-range camera operated by a professional photographer she'd hired days ago. "Let the lens do the rest," she sneered. "Goodbye, little Zoe." Ethan made his move while Zoe stood alone by the display counter. His face looked composed, but his eyes burned with venom. "You're really thriving, huh?" he said coldly. "Meanwhile, I lost everything." Zoe stiffened. "You shouldn't be here." "Oh, I'm a guest investor, invited by none other than Jameson Holt. Thanks to you. Now smile." Before she could react, he yanked her close, pulling her tightly into his chest just as the flash of a camera went off. "Let go of me," she struggled. He smirked, whispering through clenched teeth. "You'll regret humiliating me 2 years ago, Zoe. Very soon." 3 hours later, the internet exploded. Photos of Ethan embracing Zoe spread like wildfire, painting the scene as a tender reunion. At the same time, an anonymous account leaked a series of evidences, screenshots of emails, allegedly showing Zoe leaking Carter Enterprises' exclusive design plans to their competitor, Jameson Holt's conglomerate. Headlines hit the press fast. "Wife of Carter, CEO accused of selling confidential designs to rivals." "Ex-lover and a sinister plot behind the $1 million wedding?" In her private office, Valerie smiled coldly. "The $1 billion deal will collapse the moment shareholder trust crumbles." Meanwhile, Damien returned to the mansion with his assistant. As Zoe walked out of the study, he slammed a thick folder full of printed images onto the table. His eyes cold, brutal. "Explain this." Zoe looked at the photos. Her heart dropped like a hammer. "Who sent you these?" "That's not the point," Damien snapped. "What I want to know is, do you still love him?" Zoe went pale. "You think I actually did this?" "Then what about the photo? The leaked emails from your personal account?" "I was framed. Someone set me up." Her voice cracked, trembling with both rage and heartbreak. Damien didn't respond. He turned his back to her, fists clenched, shoulders trembling slightly. He wanted to believe her, but every piece of evidence pointed one way. Zoe slowly removed her wedding ring. "You can doubt everything, but if you doubt my heart, then there's nothing left to say." She placed the ring on the table, quietly, firmly, devastatingly. Before she turned to leave, she looked back, eyes red. "I once thought you were the only man in the world who didn't see me as a liar." Damien didn't follow her. He didn't say a word. The door closed behind her with a hollow, aching echo. Zoe left the mansion in the rain, a small suitcase in one hand, Muffin curled up quietly in her carrier. She called a cab, her eyes dry. No more tears, just a shattered heart and the dizzying pain of being doubted by the only man she trusted. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew. She couldn't go back there again. In the study, Damien sat alone. The $1 billion merger deal had been suspended due to suspicions of internal leaks. Company stock plummeted. The board demanded answers. But the only thing Damien couldn't breathe past was the thin wedding ring sitting on the wooden table. She was really gone. He stared again at the photo of Ethan hugging Zoe and suddenly noticed something. Her expression wasn't warm. It wasn't affectionate. It was terrified. Could it be? Damien shot to his feet. Damn it, I was wrong. Damien Carter had never felt this powerless in his life. In the cold-lit boardroom, the members of the executive committee sat in a line, stern-faced. Every pair of eyes stared at him as if he were on trial. "Carter," one senior member began, his voice laced with doubt, "we need assurance that the $1 billion Technova deal isn't being jeopardized by an internal leak." Damien clenched his fist beneath the table. "We're investigating," he replied, keeping his tone steady. "And I assure you, Zoe had nothing to do with it." A cold scoff echoed. "She's your wife," another man said. "You sure your judgment isn't clouded by emotion?" Damien didn't respond, but inside silence was screaming. The moment he exited the room, he called his assistant. "I want every email log from the past month, security footage, login data, anything tied to Valerie Cooper, Jameson Holt, or anyone with access to the technical data floor. Prioritize it." A few days later, the truth cut through the air like a sharpened blade. A senior technical director had accepted bribes from Valerie in exchange for limited access to internal files. The photo of Zoe and Ethan? AI manipulated. Damien spotted inconsistencies in lighting and motion blur down to the pixel. The email sent from Zoe to the rival firm? Fabricated. Her email had been spoofed, set up by a hacker hired under Valerie's directive. Evidence suggested Jameson was partially involved. Damien slammed the case file onto the table, his body trembling with restrained fury, but his eyes had turned cold, steel cold. Enough! At an emergency press conference, Damien stepped up to the podium, his face carved from ice. Valerie was in the back of the room with Jameson, assuming everything was still under control. "We've just concluded an internal investigation," Damien announced, his gaze zeroing in on Valerie. "And I can now declare this publicly. Zoe Carter had no involvement in any data breach." A wave of murmurs rippled through the press corps. Damien continued. "The actual culprit was a senior staff member, hired and bribed by Valerie Cooper and by one of our direct competitors." He turned to Jameson, lifting the evidence file. "Still want to deny it?" Valerie's face went pale. She turned to Jameson, panicked. Jameson stepped back, shrugging off her grasp. "I had nothing to do with you." Valerie screamed, "You were part of the plan too!" "No," he said flatly, voice cold. In front of dozens of cameras, Jameson disavowed Valerie completely. She stood frozen, betrayed, and discarded like a pawn. Soon after, Valerie was indicted for bribery and conspiracy to sabotage a competitor. Victory. But Damien didn't feel any relief. He returned to the mansion that night, his shirt still creased from the press conference. Everyone had left. Only the wind howled in the courtyard, and a dim lamp glowed faintly in the hallway. Zoe wasn't there. No soft footsteps from the kitchen, no scent of morning coffee, no tiny figure curled up sketching by the window. Damien stepped into the art room, her haven. The latest draft she'd been working on still lay unfinished on the table. A cup of herbal tea sat empty beside it. The lamp's light caught faint pencil strokes on the paper lines waiting to be colored. He sat down and opened a drawer. Inside was a small blue hair clip, the one she always used when working. And suddenly he felt like the most miserable man on earth. He reached for Muffin, gently stroking the cat's soft fur. The cat leaned into his chest as if searching for the familiar presence it missed so dearly. "I was wrong, wasn't I?" Damien whispered, his voice tight. "I should have believed you. I should have known. That look in your eyes, that wasn't the look of a traitor." Muffin let out a faint, sorrowful meow. Damien leaned back in the chair, eyes drifting toward the ceiling. Lost. He had everything: power, wealth, reputation. And he had lost the only thing that gave it all meaning. Zoe. He searched everywhere she could have gone, tried every way to reach her. But it was as if Zoe had vanished from Damien's world. Now Damien Carter, the man who once made the financial world tremble with a single raised eyebrow, was standing in his kitchen, wearing an apron, sleeves rolled up, and eggs smeared all over them. "Soft-boiled eggs," he muttered, staring at the disaster on the plate. "Not burnt to hell." Muffin sat lazily on the kitchen counter, licking his paw. He looked at Damien with what could only be described as profound disappointment, as if to say, "She's not going to eat that, you idiot." Damien sighed and slumped into a chair, gazing around the kitchen. Empty. No scent of herbal tea, no clattering of pots, no voice mumbling, "Cut carrots like you're slicing a heart." All of it now, just memories. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. The faint smell on the apron reminded him of her. He missed her. That night he stood in the bathroom, holding her toothbrush. Lavender purple, meaningless to anyone else but to him, it hurt to look at. And then he started humming. Off-key, off-beat, a song Zoe used to hum while sketching. He only remembered the absurd chorus. "Loving you is like loving rice paper, crispy, hot, and I don't know what I'm doing." Muffin sprawled dramatically at his feet, clearly suffering auditory torture. "I know," Damien said hoarsely, glancing down at the cat. "I suck at this." But she laughed when I sang it. Every night he left her bedroom door open. The bed remained untouched, sheets perfectly flat like she'd never left. Muffin didn't sleep in his cozy cat bed anymore. Instead, he curled up on her pillow, nuzzling the little dent where her head used to rest. Once Damien walked in to find the cat chewing gently on her handkerchief. Muffin licked it all over, then looked up at him and let out a short, plaintive meow. His heart cracked again. Even the cat missed her. One day he opened her laptop, the one she'd forgotten to take. Inside her design folder was an untitled sketch. He opened it and froze. It was a drawing of a small, sunlit room, a sofa, a crooked house plant in the corner, and in the middle, a man holding a cup of tea staring out the window. The face wasn't fully shaded in, but the eyes, they were unmistakable. It was him, not Damien the CEO, not the powerhouse, the billionaire, just a man, standing still, as if waiting for someone to come home. "You saw me like this?" he whispered. "Not a monster, but someone who could love?" He printed it, framed it, placed it on his desk. From now on, anyone who entered his office would see that unfinished face, a silent reminder that once a girl had dared to dream of him and dared to believe that love was real. Damien stepped into the garden. The faint scent of lavender lingered in the breeze, the one Zoe always said smelled like peace. He stood beneath the trellis where she'd once sketched her dream home. Those designs were still in the studio, neatly tucked in a folder. He pulled out his phone, hands slightly shaking. No more selfies. No unread messages. Just one name left in his contacts. Zoe, wife. That single word wife now felt like a blade. He hit call. It rang, then disconnected. No answer. He clutched his head, eyes shut tight. "Can you hear me? Do you still think of me? Or did I lose everything just because I didn't believe in you?" Muffin rubbed against his leg, nudging gently like he understood. Damien knelt down, stroking the cat's soft fur. "I swear, if I ever get a second chance, I will never lose her again." Muffin let out a soft meow. Damien gave a tired, broken smile, voice hoarse. "You're right. I'll wait for her to come back." The pale blue dress hugged Zoe's figure like water, flowing gently with every step she took across the grand ballroom. Every gaze followed her, not just for her elegant beauty, but for the cool, unwavering strength in her eyes. 6 months had passed. She was no longer the shy girl who blushed under Damien's gaze. She was confident, poised, and heartbreakingly alone. The Young Creators Foundation Charity Gala had drawn hundreds of notable guests. Zoe now worked independently, designing for an art-based nonprofit. She hadn't come here expecting to see anyone from her past. But fate, as always, had a cruel sense of timing. He was there, Damien Carter, tall, composed in a dark suit, eyes scanning the room as though nothing else existed in the world but her. Their eyes met. No smiles, no steps forward. Just a few seconds of stillness, like time had frozen until Zoe turned away, set down her glass, and walked with careful composure toward the exit. Outside, the rain began to fall, first gently, then steadily, like the frantic rhythm of a racing heart. Zoe quickened her steps, her chest tightening with each breath. She didn't run, but she didn't stop either. Her heels tapped against the wet pavement, sharp, defiant clicks. Suddenly, a black umbrella swept across her line of sight. A familiar hand held it steady above her. "Zoe!" Just one word, but his voice rough, trembling, sounded like a man who had crossed a desert and finally found the last drop of water. She turned. Raindrops streamed down her face, tears maybe. She couldn't tell. "Why are you here?" "I was wrong," Damien said, his voice cracking. "I should have believed you. I should have stood beside you, not against you." Zoe gave a faint laugh, but her eyes shimmered. "And you think an umbrella is enough to fix that?" Damien stepped closer. His white dress shirt, soaked and clinging to his frame, revealed every tense line of his body. But Zoe didn't care about the image. All she saw was a man raw, broken, real. "No," he said quietly. "The umbrella isn't enough, but it's all I have to start. No contracts, no conditions, just me and you. Honestly." He extended his hand, no pressure. She looked at it, the same hand that had once held her waist, that had brushed her cheek with terrifying gentleness. I used to think I didn't need anyone, Damien said, never taking his eyes off her. But you made me want to live differently. You taught me to care, to listen, to love. Zoe trembled. I want a family, he whispered. A home, not a mansion, not luxury, just you, your laugh, and Muffin. Tears finally spilled down her cheeks. I know you're scared, he said, stepping closer, his voice hoarse. Scared you're not enough, scared you'll be hurt. But you don't have to be anything, Zoe. You're already everything I want. Zoe's voice broke as she cried out into the rain. You don't know how much I've hurt. I loved you with everything, Damien, and you threw it all away for a few fake photos. I know, Damien gasped, stepping closer still, rain pelting his face. I was stupid, cowardly, proud. But if I get the chance to love you again, I'll give up everything else. She stared at him, chest rising and falling, heart aching. I'm sorry for letting you go. I'm sorry for making you be strong when you didn't want to be. You don't have to be strong anymore. Cry, yell, curse me. But please don't leave again. He stepped forward. The umbrella slipped from his hand. The rain came down in sheets. He took her hand. For the first time since their separation, she didn't pull away. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her tight. She didn't resist. I'll stay right here, Damien whispered, voice trembling. Whether you forgive me or not. Zoe leaned her forehead against his chest, listening to the wild thump of his heartbeat. I'm scared, she murmured. Scared that if I trust you again, I'll lose everything again. You won't, he replied, breathless. Because this time, I won't lose you. The rain kept falling, but in each other's arms they found a flicker of warmth. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Zoe smiled, truly smiled, in the embrace of the man who had once hurt her most, and the man she still loved most. The entire city buzzed with shock when Damien Carter made headlines not for closing a billion-dollar deal, but for doing something completely unheard of. CEO of Carter Enterprises takes 6-month leave. No salary, no corporate reason. Social media exploded. Speculations ran wild. Was he terminally ill? Losing his mind? Planning to secretly acquire a rival company? But only a few close insiders knew the truth. There was one man trying to win back the only woman he had ever loved. Zoe heard the news from a former colleague. A red-headed assistant leaned in, whispering with gleeful disbelief. He's gone mad. 6 months off. All for a girl. Zoe pretended not to care, but her hand tightened around her coffee mug tight enough to nearly crack the ceramic. Her heart, no matter how hard she tried to deny it, was thundering inside her chest. He really is crazy, she repeated softly, but this time her lips curled into a smile she couldn't hide. That night, Zoe returned to her small 5th-floor apartment, the place she had rented after leaving the mansion. Suddenly, the sky broke open with heavy rain. Raindrops hammered against the window panes, drumming like the ache of longing that had never quite gone away. She was about to switch on the light when the doorbell rang. She opened the door, and standing there, drenched in the storm, was Damien. No coat, no umbrella, just a man, soaked to the bone, with eyes that burned hotter than lightning. I was going to lose my mind if I didn't come, Damien said, voice ragged from the cold. I'm not a CEO anymore. I'm not Carter Enterprises. I'm just Damien, the man who broke your heart, and is begging you for a chance to fix it. Zoe stood frozen. She couldn't look away from him. He stepped forward, rainwater sliding down his chiseled face. His white shirt clung to his frame, revealing every contour, every scar, every regret. But his eyes, oh, his eyes were what left her breathless. No more pride, no more walls, just truth and desperation. Marry me again, Damien said, his voice barely a whisper. No contract, no conditions, no more pretending, just you and me. Zoe looked at him. The rain blurred her vision, but nothing could blur the way her heart trembled. You really are insane, she murmured. Damien nodded, lips tugging into a sad but tender smile. For you? Always. And then he pulled her into his arms, ignoring the downpour still drenching them both. Their kiss was no longer a performance. His lips found hers this time for real, searing and desperate, stealing the very breath from her lungs. She responded fiercely, arms around his neck, drawing him closer, tasting the man who had once broken her and now was piecing her back together. Damien scooped her up like she was the most precious thing he'd ever held, carrying her into the apartment as the door swung shut behind them. Inside, the warmth quickly rose opposite to the cold raging outside. The soft glow of the bedside lamp lit the wild hunger in his eyes. His shirt hit the floor, buttons torn by her trembling fingers. She let him undress her too, shedding not just clothes but every wall still left between them. His lips kissed her skin, tracing her collarbone, drifting lower. And she shivered, not from the rain, but because she knew this was real. Their bodies collided, desperate and unrestrained, like two souls who had been starving for this one truth. But it wasn't just lust, it was love. It was an apology. It was the longing to belong forever. Damien didn't rush. His hands memorized every line on her back, etching her into his soul. Every time he whispered her name, his voice broke with emotion. She bit his shoulder gently, whispering, "If this is a dream, don't wake me up." He pulled her closer, lips against her ear. "It's not a dream. It's my life. You're my life." Afterward, they lay tangled in each other's arms. Two heartbeats synced as one, breaths entwined. Zoe smiled through her tears. "I don't know whether to love you or hate you," she whispered. "Just love me," Damien murmured, stroking her back. "I'll take care of the hating part." "So, this 6-month leave," she asked, brushing her fingers over his chest. "What exactly are you planning to do with it?" He kissed her forehead. "Love you, make breakfast, play with Muffin, and plan a real wedding." Zoe laughed this time, no tears, because this time she knew this love was real, and she was finally ready to live it, as his wife, his lover, and the partner he truly deserved. 1 week later, Damien and Zoe were having breakfast when the morning news blared from the TV. Designer Ethan Rowe, arrested for investment fraud and forged contracts, estimated damages over $3 million. Zoe froze mid-bite. The screen showed Ethan in handcuffs, pale as a ghost, trying to shield his face from the flashing cameras. Damien smirked. "About time." Zoe didn't say anything. She simply squeezed his hand. She didn't feel joy, just relief. There was no need for revenge. He'd destroyed himself. That morning, the sky was strangely clear. Sunlight spilled through the trees into the garden of the mansion, casting golden rays over rows of white chairs lined with lavender petals. No media, no flashing cameras, just their closest loved ones, and two hearts finally ready to belong to each other, for real. Zoe stepped out from the mansion, graceful and stunning, in a simple yet elegant silk wedding dress that hugged her slender frame. Her hair fell naturally, a single flower tucked behind her ear. As she walked down the aisle, Damien didn't take his eyes off her, not for a second. It was as if the world had blurred into nothing, leaving only her. He stood tall in a navy blue suit, clutching a bouquet of white flowers. His heart wasn't pounding from nerves, but from overwhelming emotion. Because the woman walking toward him wasn't his contract bride anymore. She was his choice, his forever. At the front row, Muffin, their cat, sat proudly with a pink ribbon around her neck, like a tiny witness to a love once deemed impossible, now made real. The ceremony took place beneath an old tree, the breeze rustling the leaves like nature's own soundtrack to their beautiful ending. Zoe gazed into Damien's eyes no longer guarded, but filled with certainty and trust. She spoke softly. "I used to think I'd always be running, from feelings, responsibilities, even myself. But you gave me a place to stop, a home, a reason to dream of a family." Damien squeezed her hand as if committing each word to memory. He replied, his voice deep and slightly trembling. "I used to think I didn't need anyone. I believed power and success were all that defined me. But then you came along, and you made me feel for the first time. For you, for us, I'm done pretending." They exchanged rings, simple, unflashy, but shining bright. Because this time, there were no performances. Just love. Pure, honest love. The officiant smiled, voice steady. I now pronounce you husband and wife, by law, by love, and by some wonderfully strange destiny. Applause broke out, modest but warm. Zoe laughed just as Muffin let out a loud meow, as if to second the declaration. Damien leaned down, kissing her lips. No pressure, no stage. Just a kiss between two people madly, truly in love. Gentle, deep, real. That night, their bedroom was no longer cold. Zoe curled in Damien's arms, hair tousled from the emotional storm they'd weathered. The sheets were tangled, his chest rising and falling as his fingers traced slow, warm lines down her back. She pressed her cheek to his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart like a lullaby she never wanted to end. On the floor, her wedding dress and his suit lay discarded. In the corner of the bed, Muffin slept peacefully, head resting on a throw pillow like the tiniest member of their new little family. Zoe whispered, You know, this all started with a mistaken kiss. Damien chuckled softly, kissing her forehead, his breath hot against her skin, his voice husky, and it's never going to end. She turned to face him, looking into his eyes. So what now? Back to work? He shook his head, his fingers gently gliding down her spine, making her shiver. Number. We're going to travel. See the world. You'll draw. I'll cook. We'll live really live. No more chains, no more roles. Just us, free and in love. She laughed, warm and content, then pulled him close again, her lips finding his. This time slow. No more hesitation, no more holding back. Outside, the wind played through the trees. The mansion, once hollow and cold, now echoed with laughter, whispered promises, and the kind of love that didn't need to be shouted to be real. If there was one thing they learned from all the pretending, the pain, and the running, it was this. True love doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs the right person and the courage to believe.